Namaste. Welcome to another edition of Navima's podcast. So today we have Deep Halder sir with us, and we will also be joined by Rami madam, Rami Desai in few minutes. So today, as you can see in from the title that we had seen in the intro, Dhaka dilemma: Bangladesh political future and the fate of its minorities in a Trump-era presidency. It's a very long and complex title that we have put in. So we try to connect the dots one by one: the dilemma, the political future, the minorities, and how international politics actually affects the minorities in Bangladesh and also other parts of the world. So on that note, Namaste Deepda.
Namaste. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Hopefully you are also doing good. Uh, yeah, you are able to hear me because you are freezing for a few seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Audience.
Yeah, it's. I think it's better now.
Yeah. Okay. We'll continue. Not a problem. So, Deepda, until Rami ma'am joins, if you remember in our previous live stream, that we had actually distributed about I think 40 to 50 books of your Bengali book that you can see here, Bangladeshi Hindu Bangladesh.
Yes.
And actually, we had sought reviews and feedback from the people who are reading. So we had actually given this to journalists, common folk, teachers, bankers. So today I have two reviews. I'll share one by one bit later, one more. So this is the review that actually we have got. So this individual is a common folk, okay, who lived in West Bengal, in a rural West Bengal. Actually, he had shared the review. So I had put this up in our Twitter feed as well for people to see. And if you can, let me just read it in English. I have actually translated it it's originally in Bengali, then it's Hindi, and then English, so that people of all languages can read it. So I'll just read a few lines to just give you the feedback that audiences, the readers are giving on the book. This book is a powerful research on the past and current state of Hindu communities in Bangladesh. The book clearly describes how the minority has been subjected to pressure during both Muslim League time and subsequent periods in Bangladesh. The author presents facts and research to illustrate the issue. The book doesn't just make empty claims, but provides explanations for historical, social, social and political events. It offers new perspective on history that encourages readers to think deeply about the subject. This book is not just a description of a community's ups and downs, but also important document on the minority's past. Our language is simple and straightforward, which makes this complex topic accessible to everyone. The book is presented as a historical document. It's not just history to read, but also teaches us for the future. This is an important presentation of Deep Haldar and Mr. Abhishek Vishal. So this is the review that we have received from one of the common folk in West Bengal. So we continue to actually distribute the books to various people in India, in different states as well, and we'll continue to spread the word so that the plight of minorities in Bangladesh is known by many people as many as possible. Namaste, Rami ma'am.
Namaskar.
Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate you giving us time and coming to the podcast.
No. I apologize for coming on a bit late, but I really just hope that I can add something to this conversation when I am sitting amongst brilliant friends like Deep. So I hope I can add a few bits to what he has to say.
Sure, man. I think you will be able to do more than that. So let me go to the first.
We are eagerly waiting for your takes.
Yeah. So without wasting any time, let's go back, get to the question. So my first question is, Deepda, from your book, the book being Hindu in Bangladesh. So I had gone through the book actually twice. So I found this phrase, this para, very interesting. Over the tea and pastries, our conversation veers towards Jogendra Nath Mandal, Jogendra incidentally comes from the same district as in Bangladesh as Mandal, Borishal. His view of Mandal surprises us. Villain.
Yeah.
We ask him if it's indeed what he meant. Yes, he was a villain. Hindus in Bangladesh are suffering today because of that man. He led us down. Led us down the garden path by talking about Dalit, Hindu, and Muslim unity. Many upper caste Hindus left during partition. Dalit stayed back. He was the tall leader everyone looked after. And what he did so, he resigned and ran away to India. So on this quote, I want you to first give a historical context and also the modern perspective, the role of minorities in Bangladesh and their plight, and how the history connects to the plight that we see today. So, Dibda.
Okay. So, I mean, that's of course Joyanto Kormoka's view, and he's a Bangladeshi Hindu. So we will have to give credence to what he's saying because it's a lived reality. He faces what he faces. We are at a distance, safe distance, trying to report and analyze, what's happening to Hindus in Bangladesh. But having said that, it's an interesting perspective because very few people know about Jogendra Nath Mandal, unless you're a student of history or unless you are particularly interested in that region, Bangladesh. But Jogendra Nath Mandal was the first law and labor minister of Pakistan. Okay, when the partition of India happened, and we became two countries, India and Pakistan, and what is today known as Bangladesh became East Pakistan. Jogendra Nath Mandal became the first law and labor minister because he had the support of the Dalits of the Bengali Dalits, from that region, and he had chosen Jinnah's Muslim League over Gandhi Nehru's Congress. And one of the reasons he had done so was that he felt, and that's what he told his supporters, that look, the lower caste Hindus as well as the Muslims of East Bengal, at that time it was East Bengal, eastern part of Bengal, are both victims of upper caste Hindus who are mostly the landowning class. So just because partition has happened and there is a migration of upper caste Hindus from east to west, from East Bengal to West Bengal, which was becoming East Pakistan, there is no need for lower caste Hindus to do so, because the Muslims are not their enemies. Their enemies were in fact leaving, the enemies being the upper caste Hindus. And many lower caste Hindus stayed back in Pakistan, in East Pakistan, listening to Jogendra Nath Mandal, who was the tallest leader. In fact, many would argue that Jogendra Nath Mandal at that time was more famous than B.R. Ambedkar. Okay, he was extremely electorally powerful also. Ambedkar was not very electorally powerful. Jogendra Nath Mandal was very electorally powerful. People actually thronged in large numbers to listen to him and to follow him. But when Pakistan was formed and India and Pakistan became two different countries, Jogendra Nath Mandal, much to his horror, saw that in the new country, the lower caste Hindus are being looked at as Hindus, and the atrocities are continuing. So there is no longer a caste division. The Muslim gangs are pitting lower caste Hindus who had stayed back. Okay, so it was much to his horror. So he wrote letters to his political bosses, including to Jinnah. Okay, change. Can you hear me?
Yeah. You can continue. There's some breakage, but we can continue. If it's too bad, then I'll tell you. I think.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think not disconnect. Yeah. So, so he saw much to his horror that that his brothers and sisters, the lower caste Hindus, are being attacked for being Hindus. Caste did not matter. So he, of course, wrote letters to his political bosses in West Pakistan, but nothing happened. And finally, he resigned as Law and Labor Minister. The resignation letter is also very famous these days on Twitter. It's circulated a lot. and he himself moved from Pakistan to India, to West Bengal, okay, where he tried to revive his political career by trying to appeal to the lower caste Hindus of West Bengal. Nothing much came out of this phase of his political career, and he died a broken man, an unsung hero. Uh, so now, when you look back, you can, of course, like Jayanta Karmokar, blame him for reading the room wrongly, for somehow thinking that there would be an alliance between Muslims and lower caste Hindus. Of course, he was proved wrong. He himself had to almost run away and take refuge in West Bengal. But he also left behind a significant chunk of lower caste Hindu population who had listened to him at that time and had not crossed over, when the so-called upper caste Hindus were migrating. So if you see the history of migration of the East, in the West, in Pakistan, the partition happened in one fell sweep. Okay, there was this one, if I may, one jhatka in which the partition happened. In the East, on the other hand, as you know, waves of migration kept happening. So typically, the first wave of migration that happened were the upper caste, so-called upper caste Hindus. Okay, because like I said, many of the among the lower caste Hindus stayed back in East Pakistan listening to Jogendra Nath Mandal. But after Jogendra Nath Mandal himself came from East Pakistan to West Bengal, of course, migration of lower caste Hindus happened, 50s, 60s, till 70s, and is still happening. But to where I would perhaps not agree with Jointo is that it's not just lower caste Hindus who stayed back in East Pakistan. There were people from other castes as well. If you go to Bangladesh today, if you look at Hindus, there are a lot of Hindus from all castes, okay, who have stayed back. So it's not, you can't just blame Jogendra Nath Mandal for the plight of Hindus in Bangladesh today, but he definitely was a factor. And the fact that his socio-political experiment of trying to stitch an alliance of lower caste Hindus and Muslims by saying that the upper caste Hindu is your common enemy, of course, failed in his lifetime. So he himself uh, became a failed hero, if I can say it that way. Jayanta Karmokar, who you quoted, of course, calls him a villain. I won't go that far, but definitely his social experiment failed, and he perhaps, like I said, read the room very wrong. When he I mean, you could do it for yourself. You may stay back thinking that, okay, this is going to happen. But when you are such a popular political figure, when lakhs of people are listening to you and taking a decision, then if you take such a wrong decision, of course history won't judge you kindly.
Yeah, thank you, Deepda, for this insight, because it's important for the new audience who are joining to actually
Yeah.
get the context where we'll go now. So, Rami ma'am, over to you. So, you have studied Northeast India. You have stayed in Northeast India for so many years, did research and a lot of things. So, from your perspective as a strategic analyst, what do you think the instability that happened after 5th August and Trump coming in, and there's a lot of happening in Bangladesh where see the political instability, we see economy going bad, the security of fencing of the border. So how do you think Trump coming in and the new government might come in with election, other things, how is going to affect northeast of India specifically?
First of all, thank you for having me on the show, and my apologies again for being late. But listening to Deep is just every time I listen to him, I find out five new things, and this sort of historical rooting of what is happening today is so important to understand because it gives you like this sort of chain of events that has led to the situation that we see today. And it is similar with the Northeast as well. It's very important to understand what have been the historical legacy problems in the Northeast region to understand what is the impact that is going to happen, because the impact of Bangladesh and Myanmar on the Northeast region will be and is the kind of impact that we would have never seen in this country before. With all due respect to the situations that we have faced in the northwestern frontier of our country, we must realize was only dependent on a border that is not a fraction of the border that we see in the Northeast region, but also we were taking on one country. What we see today, and when we talk about Bangladesh, unfortunately or fortunately, we cannot talk about it in isolation. What we are seeing happening in our northeastern border uh, is a culmination of what is happening not just in Bangladesh, but the Bay of Bengal, as well as Myanmar, as well as the change in dispensations and the interest of the West in this region, which is now, which is now very evident. We were doing a lot of guesswork before Sheikh Hasina's ouster, that there's Western involvement. Deep had written a lot about it. I had written about it. So had so many other people saying that, look, they are not saying this. Obviously, a country is not going to go and say, oh, we want a regime change. But, you know, if you had just followed what the US Embassy in Dhaka was doing, what Ambassador Haas at that point, the places that he was visiting, whether, you know, the sanctions that they were putting, even to put sanctions on the RAB, you know, their elite paramilitary force, to openly, continuously keep saying that, oh, we want fair and free elections, we want democratic elections. All were all was leading towards us realizing that there is something amiss here. Now you look at, and you know, I know we are talking about Bangladesh primarily, but you know, like I said, we cannot, because these borders are contiguous. We cannot talk about it until unless we understand Myanmar also, because you know we have a problem of which we've always had. We've had a problem of illegal immigration that has come in via these borders, whether they use the route of Tripura or whether there's demographic change in Assam. This has always been predominantly our problem. But what we have to realize now that Myanmar becoming the top producer of opium, the top producer of methamphetamines, the largest cultivator in the world of poppy, after Taliban cracked down on Afghanistan and it shifted, all the drug cartels shifted their base to Myanmar, it has huge impacts on Bangladesh and therefore the border of the Northeast. Majority of the trafficking of these drugs from Myanmar to Bangladesh is done by the Rohingyas, to the extent that it was having such a big impact on society that there was a death penalty that was enacted in Bangladesh against the traffickers. Um, they use routes not just via Myanmar into Assam, but also via Bangladesh. Therefore, some of the largest hauls of drugs that have ever historically been caught in the Northeast have been in the last 2 years in the Northeast in different states. So while you have illegal immigration, you have drug trafficking, and mind you, drug trafficking obviously disseminates to the rest of the country. But a lot of the drugs, apart from methamphetamines, are also injectable, so intravenously used. Therefore, if you realize the highest rate of AIDS today is in Mizoram, so it has health repercussions as well. Number three, terror activity. We've known historically that these borders are porous. We have very, very large borders with Bangladesh and with Myanmar. Uh, the northeastern borders are difficult terrains. They cannot be plugged physically in its entirety. The government of India has initiated an integrated system which will have partial physical fencing, but also surveillance and also manning. BSF is doing a brilliant job in at least the borders of Tripura, but it was with the onset of Sheikh Hasina's government that we were actually able to take some of the insurgent groups. Uh, we were able to control them and bring down insurgency in the northeast, because typically what insurgent groups do is their bases are somewhere else. So their bases were either in Bangladesh. Now you find that they are in Myanmar also. Therefore, they would use these bases, come, attack, do whatever they had to, and go back. What also happened at this point is there was a lot of local support. No insurgent travels with his ration. So when he is covering this kind of distance, he is covering this type of distance because he has local support, sleeper cells. So when Sheikh Hasina came in, there was a lot of crackdown by Sheikh Hasina itself on the camps that were in Bangladesh. Remember that it was also ISI that was supporting these groups via Bangladesh. So one of the reasons that we could bring, apart from the motivated focus of this present dispensation in curbing insurgency, was also that we had great relations with Sheikh Hasina, and that she helped us out in cracking down on their camps. Now, today, what is happening is we have seen an unprecedented rise of the radical element. Everybody realized, and please feel free to disagree with me because I may be wrong, but everybody sort of always had some amount of virtue attached to the secular sentiment of Bangladesh. We always thought that, Bangladesh is unlike Pakistan. Therefore, it had the war, and therefore, they wanted their own identity. Little did people like me at least realize that there was this underlying current of a radical population that still wanted to be with Pakistan, and we have seen that evidence in this conflict and in this change of dispensation, and that is hugely dangerous for us. If you were to ask me to give an assessment, I would actually say 20 to 25% of the population supports Pakistan. The fact that the fact that the father of the nation, Sheikh Mujibur's house was burned down, the fact that his statues have been brought down, tells us that there is this psychological dismantling of the secular fabric of Bangladesh, and it's being taken over by this radical element. We've also further seen cargo coming in, and these are more technical sites. Cargo coming in from Pakistan, where they've said that no checking will be necessary. This spells a great security issue for us. We've seen Chittagong hill tracks implode. We've seen smaller tribes, which have transnational ethnic tribes, not just in Myanmar, but also in Mizoram and Manipur, the bomb zones, like they are called there. We've seen some amount of radicalization there, some amount of weaponization there. It's always been a problem, but we've seen that come about anew. We've seen organizations like ABT, operatives of ABT being caught in Assam within a month of Sheikh Hasina's fall. We have seen a crackdown on ABT sleeper cells in these states. That means they're already existing here. Let me also draw your attention to the fact that the Rohingyas are on our borders, whether it's the Tombu border, whether it's the Chittagong hill tracts. You have a substantial population there. This Rohingya population cannot go back to Myanmar because where they come from, the Rakhine state, is now totally under the control of the Arakan army, which is Buddhist, and which is really the reason that the Rohingyas have been thrown out of Rakhine state. So they don't want to come back. They've even been offered to be taken back, and they've said, no, you cannot guarantee our security. What does that mean? It means that they will sit on these borders. They have militant groups, whether it's the RSO or whether it's the ARSA, who have leadership whose birthplace is Pakistan, who have been trained in Saudi Arabia. It was only a couple of years ago when Tunda, the bomb-making, specializing expert of Lashkar-e-Taiba, was caught in India. And in the affidavit that was filed in the court of his statement, it said that Tunda had given a statement saying that he was only and only training Rohingyas today to be able, training them in making bombs, with the promise that they will only attack India with it, with the training that he imparts. So there's a whole gamut of problem that we are going to see. Now, when you talk about the US dispensation, here's the thing. There are two ways to look at it. One is the money that we know that Trump is cracking down on. He is not so keen to give the kind of aid that was being given under the garb of all sorts of handouts and restoring democracy, or so on and so forth. That aid, remember, has only been suspended for 9 months, whether it is in Myanmar or whether it is in Bangladesh. But I think that is going to be a bit of setback to any of these groups, because that was easy money that was coming in. But that doesn't mean that they won't go elsewhere. We already know Yunus has made some trips. He's been moving around post the change in dispensation. We also know Yunus had said some really unsavory things about President Trump. So he knows that the doors are possibly closed there. But remember one thing, that whether Trump has Trump, I believe that Trump realizes the gravity of radicalization and the inability of anybody to control radicalization. I think he has made it very clear that, especially Islamists, is something that he doesn't want to encourage. So we know that he understands that. We know that J.D. Vance understands that, or Vivek Ramaswamy understands that, right? But strategically, the Bay of Bengal is going to become a great place of action. Remember one thing: you have St. Martin's Island that came up in the news. Nothing much has happened about it, but it's always been an island that the Western world has wanted an interest in. US has over 700 bases. The reason that they have based so many naval bases is the US foreign policy is based on their naval strategy. It is said that those who, in American foreign policy, it is said that those who control the seas control the world. And that is what US foreign policy is based on. China has Coco Islands, which is 55 kilometers away from Andamans. There is a post, lookout post in Coco Islands. Coco Islands belongs to Myanmar, has been leased to China. We know the kind of footprint that China has in Myanmar today. The reason China has this footprint in Myanmar is because the US was backing the National Unity Government, which is the democratic forces under this umbrella group, and therefore China started supporting the junta. Um, China also has huge assets from Yunnan to the Shapshu port in the Bay of Bengal of oil and gas pipelines. It is their multi-billion-dollar initiative of their railroads as well. So there's a railroad coming with the oil and gas pipeline. So they have assets to protect. So now, because of the Western interest in pushing the democratic forces in Myanmar, China has gained a foothold and is supporting junta. Now, looking at China's interest in Myanmar and their foothold in Myanmar, whether Trump involves himself in internal processes of these countries is one thing. But whether it looks at it as a geostrategic place of action is another thing which they might, to counter China and to install their own influence in the Bay of Bengal. Number two, remember that we're just talking about the Americans right now. There seems to be a divergent path between the EU and the Americans. EU might just say, no, we still want to interfere because we want to counter India as well. I would really not think of this as a very wayward thought if I was to say that one of the reasons that the regime change happened, and I have heard this spoken very often in certain very highly well-informed circles, that one of the reasons that the regime change happened as quickly as it did, and there was this disinterest in Sheikh Hasina continuing, was also to teach India a lesson for not taking the stance that America and EU took in the case of Russia and Ukraine. It's almost like the West thought that India is becoming too big for their boots. So when you ask me what is the role of the West, I would simply say that it can go two ways. While we know that they understand the limitations of them controlling radical forces, and which would result in instability of the whole region, there will also be forces that will be forced to do this, not just to counter China, but to counter India as well, and have a footprint in the Bay of Bengal.
Yeah, thank you, man. I think you gave quite a bit of insight and a new understanding and knowledge that I think we might not have, because you have studied, you work with a lot of think tanks on this. So I'll come back to you a little bit later. I'll go back to the second question I had with Deepda, with context on the politics, the internal politics of Bangladesh. So with the ouster of Sheikh Hasina, and the new players have come in. So you have Chhatro Shibir, you have BNP, you have also a students' political party coming in. So how do you think the complex politics of Bangladesh is going to become more complex with the new players coming in, and how India and West Trump is going to deal with that thing? Didda, I think you are frozen. Didda, are you able to hear me? I think you are frozen. Let me just connect. I think, yeah, I think Deepta, Rami ma'am.
Yes.
I think Deepta is having some technical issue. Let me just, I think she's just back. Yeah, Deepta, are you able to hear me? Yeah, Deepta, are you able to
Yeah,
hear me? Did you get my question, or shall I repeat it?
line is not very clear. Tell
Yeah,
me.
okay, I'll repeat it. So my question was with regard to the complex politics of Bangladesh, where in previous years we have
Can
seen
you?
yeah, BNP and Sheikh Hasina playing the role of a primary opposition and the primary parties. So with 5th August coming in, now we are seeing new players coming to the complex politics of Bangladesh. So this Chhatro Shibir is there, you have Jamaat is there, you have a new student party, Yunus is a one more political factor. So the political number, the political complexity of Bangladesh with new entrants like Yunus and Chhatro Shibir coming in, how do you think India is going to deal with that thing? Or even in general Bangladesh people are going to deal with the complex politics of Bangladesh with new entrants coming in. Uh, did you get my question? I think. Oh, okay. There is some technical issue with Deepda. Rami ma'am,
Yeah.
I think Deepda is having some connectivity issues. So I'll continue with for my next question.
Yeah.
So my next question was that with this specific statement by Trump that Mr. Modi, you take care of Bangladesh. Okay, I'm not going to get involved. So, and it was a lot of debate, like a lot of media was there about it. So, tell me, is there any significance to that statement in any way? Because you will be able to decode it better than the media can.
See, of course, I think it's very significant because it tells you where it is on Trump's priority list. I think right now Trump is and his government is focusing on America first, as they should. They have a lot of internal problems of their own. They have illegal immigration of their own. They have a high level of radicalization, inflation. So I think they are really focusing on fixing their own economy, fixing their own security situation, as opposed to um, giving out their own taxpayers' money for situations that don't really affect them directly. We have also seen, and let me digress slightly here. We have also seen the exploding story of USAID. Where all money was spent. And it obviously was very clear that USAID was a Trojan horse, which really, in this acronym which says aid and gives you an impression that it has something to do with humanitarian access, was actually a Trojan horse to interfere politically in the internal affairs of many, many countries. Whether it was millions of dollars being given to the election commission in India, whether it was to news media channels that were predominantly left and anti, at least the Indian government, or whether it was interference in Bangladesh. I think it is evident that American taxpayers' money was going to also, like, some of the stuff, and I just have to mention this because I found it so funny. Some of the stuff was on, like, making Sesame Street, like some $20 million on Sesame Street for Iraqi children. It was ridiculous. Transgender opera, even this whole DEI thing, which they were pushing in many countries, and I think was a very dangerous thing, because even in India, we saw chahe koi bhi protest hota tha, it would become political. Even if it was the gay pride parade, you'd see something political happening there. And I remember speaking to one of the Mumbai gay pride parade organizers, and they said, "Yaar, हमारा तो कुछ लेना देना ही नहीं है. What is this politics that is happening in so what I'm trying to say is that there was all this money that was going into all this interference, and these were Trojan horses, even though they seemed like it was for some diversity, equality, inclusiveness. It wasn't. And I think that is what Trump is going to scale back on. The minute money is less, a lot of this stuff takes a back seat, because you cannot continue any protest if it doesn't have funding. No protester will stop his job for 30 days, sit on the roads. If he isn't being fed, or if he isn't, classic case for India was the CA protests. Shaheen Bagh, we know that everybody was given money, campsites were made, there was farmers' protests, same thing. So I think that money is going to scale back. What Trump meant by saying offhandedly to Prime Minister Modi that you take care of Bangladesh, that look, it's not my priority right now. I am not really going to bother with it. You deal with the government as you will, and potentially, in my opinion, Prime Minister Modi and Trump have a great they have great diplomatic strengths amongst each other. They have a great relationship. And I think India's already sent its foreign secretary to Bangladesh. There have been some level of talks, though I don't think this present interim government should be legitimized under any permutation or combination, because finally it is an illegal government. It's not a democratically elected one. But I think it really means that your diplomatic processes or how you want to dialogue with Bangladesh is something that we are not going to interfere with. And it also leaves the future possibility of India actually having channels open with the US to take support if need be. But I think this is stuff that we'll have to wait and watch and see how it unfolds.
Yeah, thank you. I think you gave a befitting reply. And just to put your comment and context, so this book, The Ultimate Goal by Mr. Vikram Sood, talks about the narrative war which takes place. So this narrative war with protest and other things. So what looks like a conspiracy theory now becomes a reality after 30 years.
Correct.
Yeah, Siddha, so hopefully you can hear me. So my question was, with UNIS and other political players, new political players coming into Bangladesh politics, with BNP and Army League already there, what do you think the minorities of Bangladesh, are their lives going to get better, worse, or same with new political players? How they will negotiate with these forces now?
So I think the crisis in Bangladesh has gone beyond what is going to happen to minorities. Interestingly, even Jamaat has been saying very pro-minority stuff recently. There's a new face of Jamaat, which is Jamaat is saying that there should be tolerance towards all religions. BNP has been saying that minorities should be protected. In fact, the new Students' Party that has come up, they have also spoken about people of all faiths, finding equal treatment in Bangladesh. So on the face of it, everybody is speaking up for the minority population in Bangladesh. Having said that, I think the book came out not after August 5th last year. My book being in Bangladesh, whose Bengali edition you have up on screen, that came out, in fact, almost 5-6 months before Hasina's fall. So I would argue that minorities in Bangladesh were never, nobody really cared for the minorities in Bangladesh. There were regular attacks on minorities even during Hasina's time, but at least she, on the face of it, she and her government put up a secular face. They took action when there were concerted attacks on minorities, which we saw were completely gone once she went out of power. But right now, there are, of course, sporadic incidents that are happening across Bangladesh, and you see some of those on Twitter. But if you since I've been looking at Bangladesh for a while now, I know that even while Hasina was there, some of these attacks took place. What happened immediately after Hasina's fall, in 3, 4, 5 months after Hasina's fall, was horrific in terms of the number of attacks, the regularity of attacks, But now it's tapered off. Now the attacks that are happening, those kind of attacks had happened even when she was there, very much there. But your question, what will happen to them? I think the answer to that is we have to first figure out what's going to happen to Bangladesh. Firstly, when will the next elections be held?
Yeah.
Because I think Professor Muhammad Yunus is in no hurry to immediately call elections. He has said that end of this year or early next year, but he has also stressed on reforms. He did something very smart. He recently had a press conference where he said, whatever you are demanding, please tell us what kind of reforms you want to see, so we will put those your demands on a website. Okay, so once you do that, all political parties, they'll be in a sense exposed that what is it you want as a reform. So he said, we'll have a website and we will put up all your demands on a website for the public to see that this political party wants this kind of reform in the country. So now, if you say, I want constitutional reforms, I want judicial reforms, I want electoral reforms, the process can go on forever. BNP, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which I feel, and there are many who feel so, they have a very good chance of perhaps coming to power, if elections are held soon, because Army League, they're disorganized. Most of their leaders and workers are in exile. So perhaps BNP would have done very well electorally if elections were held recently. They are getting very worried because as time passes by, they don't know what the political situation is going to be. Now, there is this new students party who are also saying all kinds of things. They're saying that it's equality for every citizen. They have also said that they will put an end to dynasty rule. I think they meant both Army League and the BNP. They said that India, we can have good relations with India, but only based on equality. You have to look India in the eye and sit on the negotiating table. So you don't. Jamaat is looking at a makeover. They're saying very politically correct things. So it's a hodgepodge. You don't know what's going to happen to Bangladesh. What is the political future of Bangladesh? When will elections be held? Which party will come to power if elections are held? Well, Army League will be allowed to contest in those elections. So minorities in Bangladesh, I think the common citizen of Bangladesh today needs to worry what is the future of her country today. The minorities in Bangladesh, I think hopefully the kind of attacks that were reported across media, outside Bangladesh, inside Bangladesh as well. I think I hope that those kinds of attacks are not happening anymore. But there are sporadic attacks, as you see them on the news. But they happened before also.
Yeah. So I'll go to the next question. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Elected government. I think that's what any Bangladesh watcher would tell you. What Rami was also saying, that India perhaps, and she would know this more better than me, that perhaps Delhi would not want to engage with an unelected government. Delhi would want to engage with an elected government, whoever that elected government is. So till such time elections are held in Bangladesh and an elected government comes to power, because this is an unelected government. It was a stopgap arrangement, right? So only when elections are held can Delhi negotiate.
Correct.
Yeah. So I'll ask the last question to Deepda and then to Rami ma'am. So Deepda, you in your book that you have written, this English version and the Bengali version is there. So there is a chapter called "The DNA of Hate."
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would request everybody who wants to understand what's happening in Bangladesh today, go and buy the book, Being Hindu in Bangladesh. If you do a Google search, you will get it. It's from HarperCollins. So I have one quote which I would like you and also Rami ma'am to actually give a comment. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman had famously said This country does not belong to Hindus. This country does not belong to Muslims. Whoever thinks this country is theirs, this country will be theirs. Whoever will feel happiness seeing this country prosper, this country will be theirs. Whoever will cry seeing this country sad, this country will be theirs. This country will also belong to those who have given away everything for this country's freedom and would do so in future. So, as you mentioned, correct, the secular character of Bangladesh and Sheikh Mujibur Rahman gave this statement when he was fighting. So, what do you think is was Bangladesh ever a secular state in nature, in terms of its society, and also your in chapter you have written about the DNA of hate?
What do you want me to say? You want me to say something politically correct, or you want me to say the truth?
The
In
truth.
between, in
I think
between.
Bangladesh. I think secularism is an experiment that Bangladesh took up since its birth, but it's not something it got comfortable with ever. Okay, I mean, there was we of course had 15 straight glorious years of Sheikh Hasina's rule, and I say glorious because the strategic partnership with India was, you couldn't have asked for anything better. She had a great personal camaraderie with Prime Minister Modi. Dhaka and Delhi were in regular talks. But on the ground, if you had traveled in Bangladesh, the DNA of hate was very much visible. Okay, so this is not an experiment that Bangladesh conducted well. The experiment of secularism. There, of course, have been times in history when things were relatively better than other times, but I think it is a predominantly Islamic country, and it conducted this fantastic experiment of having a common language and culture, putting that above religiosity. But you can see what's happening today on the ground. But if there is the other, it's the Hindu, right? I mean, of course, you see that they have tried. They keep trying from time to time. For instance, Saraswati. It's not just Durga Puja. Even Saraswati Puja is held. It was held even this year inside Dhaka University with much pomp and grandeur. There is literature, common literature, great poetry, but I don't think it's an experiment that ever reached critical mass, because if it did so, it would not have happened the way it happened after Hasina's fall.
Understood. So, Rami ma'am, last question to you before we go to the Q&A session. We'll take few questions from the audience at end. So, as Deepda mentioned, that there was a glorious 15 years, the so-called glorious 15 years of Modi and Hasina partnership, and India gained a lot in that period of time. What India lost, because we have seen 2001, where there were a lot of attacks on Hindus. We have seen Hifazat-e Islam being propped up, given money and other land to build madrasas. So there were two parts of Sheikh Hasina government. One, they were delivering on the promises given to Delhi. On the other hand, they were actually pondering to the Islamists and fundamentalists within Bangladesh. So your take.
Look, I think Deep has pretty much explained this psychology well, but here are a couple of things I'd like to add, is that I think we have to look at what Sheikh Hasina was doing from a political lens. She was trying to keep her government afloat. She knew that it wouldn't be possible without appeasing, this certain population. And I think, as any seasoned politician would do in a situation like this, she was trying to balance it for as long as she could. Nobody, and she may have continued if there wouldn't have been such a huge international sort of vested interest pushing the kind of leadership that they wanted to see there. So she could have continued. But the other thing is, we must also realize what India is today. India is a hugely respected, growing power leader of the global south. and a country that many countries in the neighborhood are looking at. But what it also does when you are growing at such pace and when you have such great political stability with a clear mandate is that it brings about certain amount of again, for the lack of better words, it brings about certain amount of subnationalisms that are based on hating India. We have seen this happen in other smaller countries as well. Pakistan, उनके पास यार खाने के पैसे नहीं होंगे, उनके पास they are succumbing to the kind of debt that they have. They don't have an economy. But when it comes to India, there is a nationalism that erupts, that brings the country together. And suddenly there seems also to be enough financial aid to continue the aggression against India. We have seen this in other smaller countries as well. Without naming them, you know which ones I'm talking about, that in the past year have, have used India to create a political wave in their favor. This sort of great threat that India has a great influence on us in India. The same thing is happening in Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Whereas you see now Indira Gandhi's photographs that are being removed from books, you're seeing everything Indian being taken upon with aggression. This great amount of camaraderie that we had with the freedom fighters. I remember, Deep, if you remember, it was only last year when the embassy of Bangladesh, yeah, maybe a year and a half ago, that announced a scholarship for Indian
Yeah.
soldier children and grandchildren. Not just the children, but grandchildren, great grandchildren. Education scholarships were announced. To keep the memory of our joint struggle for their independence alive. All of that we have seen dissipate, and we have not seen it dissipate naturally. We've seen a political mandate against that memory.
Yeah.
Therefore, what we are doing also is bringing up this hatred towards India in order to homogenize some amount of loyalty towards this illegal government and the people who lead this government. So I think we have to be aware about this. Therefore, I also always say this: while minorities are being attacked in Bangladesh and we must protest against it in every nook and corner of every platform, we must also remember that we must not alienate an
Yeah.
average Bangladeshi.
Yes.
Eventually, these are our neighbors to stay. So
Yes.
this is a game. We must not fall into their trap.
Yeah. Thank you, Rami ma'am, and thank you, Deepda. So we'll take 2 or 3 questions. So we'll take 10 minutes more of your time. Okay. So this is a very interesting question from Abhay Agarwal. What do you think, Rami ma'am, about President's rule in Manipur in the purview of Bangladesh situation? How it's going to positively impact?
Look, President's rule in Manipur is completely for a different reason. It was something that was demanded by communities, and therefore it has been placed as it has been. Wherein we've also now seen the Home Ministry directives of what is demanded under this president's rule from organizations, militia groups on ground, which means surrendering their weapons, and so on and so forth, opening up of roads, free movement across the valley and the hills in order to bring peace. So I think the president's role is at this point simply to establish some amount of ceasefire and peace so that the situation can come back to normalcy. Where I say this, I also say that the rate of incidents related to the conflict had come down considerably, but obviously more had to be done because the society had become highly weaponized. So, to bring it back to absolute normalcy, this was needed. Now, where Bangladesh comes in, we must understand that, the Bangladesh situation is not just about Manipur. The Bangladesh situation impacts all of the region, so we have to look at both these situations in, 2 different ways. However, in 2017, there was a war on drugs that was announced by the Home Ministry, where all the chief ministers of the Northeast were directed to have a free hand and crack down upon the drugs that were being uh, trafficked. So I think President's rule will really, in Manipur, if I was to draw connections, would really be the ultimate crackdown on this for as long as it's there. Even though in other states, in Mizoram is just, I think it was only yesterday that over 60 crores worth of drugs were caught being trafficked in from Myanmar. But if I was, like I said, the connection, if I was to draw the connection, this would really safeguard things for the moment. But Bangladesh is a long-term issue. We must remember that if Bangladesh implodes, refugees are not going to go to Myanmar. They're going to come to India. No military in the world will open fire or will prevent women and children from coming in if the need is desperate. So this is a very, very tricky situation for us. We must hope for early elections, like Deep said. We must hope for real democracy being restored. We must hope for Awami League to be able to also come back into elections without fear. Um, and we should hope for some amount of stability that keeps the radical elements out. And I think, really Bangladeshis must realize that they needn't go the Pakistan way. It's not the greatest example to follow.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So this question to you, and this will be our second last question from Rishi Deepda to you. How did the pro-India sentiment during 1971 war by Mukti Bahini disappear? Was it an Indian government failure over a long term?
It was definitely not an Indian government failure. I mean, Indian governments, all Indian governments, definitely the current government, would want India to prosper. There's something very interesting Rami said as an answer to the last question you asked her, that we perhaps overemphasize on what's happening in Bangladesh through the prism of religion. But some of the antipathy you see towards India is not just because India is a Hindu majority country. A lot of civil society, especially the young, they look at India as a big brother. They think India is big, and India's growth story and India's size, okay, and India's success in almost all spheres is something that necessarily does not go down well with Bangladesh. 1971 was too long ago, okay, and I would say that there was Sheikh Hasina's perhaps over reliance on Mukti Juddho and 1971 war heroes and her father also perhaps led to a kind of how do I put this, disinterest. What began as disinterest turned into hatred, because all her government's faults was extended to her father, to Mukti Juddho, etc. It was too long ago. It not Indian governments, but I think Indian civil society and Bangladesh watchers in India, they also continue to look at Bangladesh through the prism of 1971 War of Independence. I mean, you would expect them to, because India played a big role there. But it's a completely new generation. They necessarily do not look at their history, their present, through the prism of 1971. Okay, and since Sheikh Hasina was a strategic partner of Prime Minister Modi, and they had a great camaraderie. So all the anti-incumbency against Sheikh Hasina also got transferred to Prime Minister Modi as hatred, towards India. So I would say that India's growth story and the fact that some of them think that India is a big brother, which it is not, to Bangladesh. That's what's that's what really triggers them. Also, some of our news channels, including Bengali news channels, the kind of stuff that's said to their columnists and participants from Bangladesh do not go down well with them. Everybody wants to be self-reliant. Everybody wants to sort of feel that they do not need a big brother. So to be constantly reminded that, oh, you exist today because India helped you win 1971, does not go down well with a young crop. Okay, so you can understand that how disinterested how forgetful they have become of 1971. They're now willing to even ally with Pakistan, and see India as the enemy, as the common enemy, whereas it is Pakistan army that killed millions, that raped so many women. They set up rape camps. What happened in Bangladesh? If you read, I keep telling people, read Arthur C. Blood Telegram, and you'd know the kind of atrocities that took place in Bangladesh at that time by the Pakistani army. But I mean, what do you say? They have forgotten their history. It's a new generation, and they would much rather look at what's happening now. And even small things become big. I'll tell you, during a cricket match last year, there's this Bangladeshi cricket fan who had come to India to watch cricket matches, and he famously wears this fake tiger skin. So people, you remember that incident, right? So
Yeah,
people harassed him. They tore off his outfit. That didn't go down well at all in Bangladesh. Okay, so those things are played again and again on the social media, and India hate is built up. It's a convenient political tool also for many political parties. But constantly seeing Bangladesh through the prism of 1971 is not helping. It's not helping anybody. You have to look at new realities.
Yeah. So last question we'll take, and I'll ask both Rami ma'am and Deepda to answer. Was there any veracity behind supposed protection of temples by the supposed majority community? Because this tactic is used to deflect from actual incidents of atrocities happening across Bangladesh. So
You
go
do
for
want to
it.
go first?
You go for it. You.
Okay, so yeah, of course, I mean, there were instances where like I said, even Jamaat is saying very pro-Hindu things. Jamaat is talking of secularism. In fact, Jamaat-e-Islami even said that we would go and protect temples. Now, I have a simple question: that if Jamaat-e-Islami is saying that we will protect temples, who are they protecting those temples from? Who are attacking those temples? If Jamaat has to go and attack and save temples, one would ask, who are these people who are attacking temples then? Okay, so obviously, some of those things. Look, I mean, like I said, even this year when when there is an unelected government in power, there was huge Saraswati Puja in Dhaka University campus. So it's not as if there's only gloom and doom. Of course, there are instances of majority community coming in to save minorities from time to time. But to extrapolate it and say that, everybody is out there to save Hindus, then the simple question is, who are attacking Hindus then? Okay, it's just something you say, and it sounds good. And I think everybody's in Bangladesh is trying to be secular. Every political outfit in Bangladesh is trying to be secular now, which is a good thing if they follow some bit of it. It's good for everybody. But then you have to also ask, who are these people who are attacking temples then?
yeah, Rami ma'am.
If I may just add, I'll just say, absolutely. I think we cannot deny the fact that there have been incidents. It was just recently that in Vivekananda International Foundation, there was an exhibition of atrocities against minorities, which the NSA visited. So I think it's fairly accepted that there has been some amount of targeting, or large amount of targeting of minorities and minority institutions. Of course, there might be instances of people brave enough to be going out and protecting these institutions, so on and so forth. But I think the greater question that lies here is, what does it mean for the future of the secular fabric? Because the people in points of leadership that we are seeing right now absolutely are encouraging anti-India hate, anti-Hindu hate, anti-minority hate, while they are using the garb of the word secularism to project that the future will be better. If the future can be better, why is it not good right now? Also, additionally, we must also remember that Sheikh Hasina, and again, Deep, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the law and order was under her control, including the
Yeah,
police state, the police
yeah,
officers.
yeah,
Even till date, a lot of these police stations remain unoccupied. So what sort of protection can you give anybody if there is a complete failure of your basic law and order? If there are no police stations, what is being reported? How do we trust that it is that? How do we know that atrocities are even being reported, or that they are getting the kind of help that they need? So there is a breakdown of law and order. I think this is a great disservice done by all interests who push for this regime change, because not only has it resulted in a complete um, dissemination of rationality and any sort of equality in Bangladesh, but also it has resulted in potential long-term regional instability.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Deepta, final word to you, or then we will finish.
So I know this. I mean, the topic of today's discussion was about minorities, but like I said, it's for the average Bangladeshi, Hindu or Muslim. It is for the average Bangladeshi now to decide what kind of country they want. It's not about Hindus anymore. It's about everybody. For instance, what happens to the women of Bangladesh, even Muslim women? Okay, what happens to the art and culture? In fact, that's an article I might be writing soon. What happens to the art and culture scene in Bangladesh? What happens to freedom of expression? What happens to education? Okay, Bangladesh was one of our neighbors which was actually doing very good for itself in many parameters. Now, all of it has received a huge pushback. It's not just the minorities. That's, of course, one very important aspect. But I think the Bangladeshi society needs to look at itself and decide what kind of future it wants. Which way will it follow? Okay, so now the sense is, like Rami said, there's a huge law and order issue in Bangladesh, and it does not just affect Hindus, it affects everybody. Okay, so Bangladesh has to see for itself that where its future lies. And I think sooner you have an elected government, the better.
Yeah. So thank you, Deepta. Thank you, Rami ma'am, for your time. I really appreciate you coming in and giving your thoughts. Okay. It was really, I think the audience actually asking too many questions. So maybe we'll invite you sometime later to discuss on Northeast itself specifically. Because I had read a few books, and whatever whatever I have talked to people, it's very complex in terms of the way it is happening. Okay. And the common people react very differently. So like it's difficult. Actually, some people actually might take your words or Deepda's words in a very unsympathetic way. That is, you and Deepda are not being sympathetic to the atrocities done to the minorities. But the case is that you being a Northeast expert, Deepda traveling, writing a lot, the knowledge that you both of you have, the words of wisdom which comes out of sanity, not being insanity, is something which I think people need to understand. That things are complex, and there will have to be some kind of compromise to actually keep the peace, not to have a war. So
I want to assure you and all your viewers that both Rami and I are very sympathetic to minorities in Bangladesh. But I think we were both trying to make a larger point that you have to see Bangladesh from all prisms. It's not just the minorities. You have to see they are a very important neighbor. So you have to also, the two countries need to come to the negotiating table sooner than later. So you can't just harp on a single issue. You have to look at it holistically. I think that's the limited point.
Also, let me add here that we tend to respond in a very knee-jerk fashion. Of course, it enrages me, it enrages you, it enrages Deep. How will it not enrage us, when we hear stories of rape, when we hear stories of murder and pillage against possibly the most, and this is not just Hindus, all the minorities who have been completely peaceful minorities in these countries.
Yeah.
They've only added value. So, of course, it enrages us. But who are we to say that, oh, they should be removed from what solely is their home and brought to India? Why should we eradicate our Hindu brethren from our neighborhood? On the contrary, we need to be able to strengthen them enough that they don't need to leave their homeland, that they can live a respectable life, and that they can be protected, because in the long term, erasing our neighborhood of our own communities will be of great disadvantage to us.
Yes. Also, let me tell you one last point, what Rami said. See, I regularly happen to talk to some of the Hindu groups. Many of them do not want to shift to India. You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
there is still a significant chunk of Hindu population who would want to stay back in Bangladesh. So you may have some hotheads from among us who would say that, open the borders, let all of them come in. But you have to ask them whether they themselves want to come in. So what Rami said, that the situation should be such, politically, societally, that everybody can stay in peace in Bangladesh. That's something we should all aspire for.
Yeah. So on that note, we'll end our program today. A big thank you to both of you for giving us the time and the knowledge and wisdom that you have disseminated to our audience. And audience would understand because a lot of things are happening in chat. So thank you. Jai Shri Ram, Vande Mataram.
Thank you.